again. Democrats have returned several times to Washington during the shutdown to see if we could do any work, but the Republicans have refused to get to work to lower costs for American families and reopen the government. It now appears that a deal is emerging in the U.S. Senate. It should be noted that this deal was struck with a small minority of Senate Democrats, while the agreement funds a large portion of the government till the end of January. The Trump administration has completely demoralized and devastated the federal workforce, starting when President Trump was sworn in.
Okay, this live that I'm doing right now is going to be a town hall by Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia. This should give a good glimpse. He's doing opening remarks right now. This should give a good glimpse of what people are thinking about with regard to the Senate deal that made news yesterday and really shocked a lot of people, and then people, as I say, are crashing out over that. At any rate, listening to the questions from real people is quite interesting, and I was hoping I could find something that could reflect what people are thinking. I have a feeling this town hall will do that. Again, this is going to be Congressman Bobby Scott's town hall. It is a Tele-Town Hall. It's an hour. It'll go from 6 to 7.
Yeah. And also
he is now giving opening remarks.
Lost during the shutdown. Now, that's actually federal law, but the president has indicated that he thinks it's an authorization, not a mandate. But there's language in this bill that makes it a mandate that the workers will be paid for lost time. It means that, it means that the government workers will be back on the job, providing those essential services that they're providing. It also takes SNAP off the table. More than 40 million Americans receive SNAP benefits to ensure that families do not go hungry. The administration's refusal to use the funds available to fully fund the SNAP program is shameful and, according to 2 appellate courts, illegal. And part of this deal, the Department of Agriculture will be funded for the remainder of the fiscal year, which means that SNAP benefits will once again go out to those who are in need, and they will not be at risk again in January if the other parts of the government run out again at the end of the continuing resolution. However, we've seen the reluctance in the Trump administration to pay these benefits time and time again, so we'll just have to see what works out. There are other parts of the bill, however, are problematic. The first and foremost is the deal does not address the primary issue, and that is cost of health care. We are experiencing a health care crisis because of bad policy choices. President Trump and congressional Republicans in their so-called big ugly bill, now it's a big ugly law, made significant cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and weakened the Affordable Care Act. We're already seeing impacts of the law. Rural hospital facilities and rural healthcare facilities are already closing, including several in Virginia. And this is creating life or death situations because experts have estimated that tens of thousands of people will die because of failure of healthcare insurance policy that we have enacted this year. Tens of thousands of premature deaths. Now, this month marks the beginning of the Affordable Care Act's open enrollment season, and millions of Americans are now seeing huge spikes in their premiums, copays, and deductibles due to the congressional failure to extend the ACA enhanced premium tax credits. This includes 326,000 Virginians and 32,000 in the 3rd District alone. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, over 40 million Americans now have health coverage. No one can be denied a pre-existing condition. You get denied coverage for a pre-existing condition. Young people under 26 can stay on their parents' policies, and there are minimum required benefits that have to be available on all policies. And we fought for years to make health care more affordable, and the failure of the deal to address the health care crisis is a huge disappointment. It is especially reprehensible when you consider that big, ugly law created $4 trillion in tax cuts $3.5 trillion in new debt, and a 10-year extension of the premium tax cuts would only be $0.3 trillion, $300 billion. So easily could have been accommodated in that bill. And we're very disappointed that it did not contain the continuation of the extended premium tax credits. Now, we know that the shutdown has been painful for many, and we're hopefully that pain will come to an end in a few days. Many federal workers have either been furloughed or experienced lapses in pay, or both. Many have been forced to work without pay, including the air traffic controllers, who are already stretched extremely thin. That's been made clear with the chaos at our nation's airports. But that's what we've been dealing with in the pain that Republicans have been willing to inflict in order to avoid dealing with healthcare, with the healthcare crisis. There's also another problem with the legislation, and that it does not address the problem in spending. The previous continuing resolutions have always never been a problem, because when you continue the spending, you continue spending what has been appropriated. It's never been a question that when the appropriation has been adopted, that you actually will spend according to the appropriation. That's the law of the land. When President Trump came in, he looked at appropriations as more of a permission, not a law. And so he will spend what he wants, when he wants, where he wants, if he wants, and a lot of the money isn't spent. If there's not an enforceable mechanism to require the money that's been agreed to be spent to actually be spent, you really don't have much of an agreement at all. And this continuing resolution fails to have that assurance. And so when President Trump announces that he's not going to send money to blue states for their transportation initiatives, when he's going to cut funding here and there and everywhere at his whim, if you thought you had agreed to a spending plan, you really hadn't. And finally, without that, you don't have a spending agreement at all. And finally, with no spending agreement and no health care in the bill, coming to an agreement just to pass a continuing resolution to reopen government may have the unfortunate effect of emboldening Republicans to believe that Democrats will always cave. Just wait and listen to what the Democrats are saying. They said, well, what we were doing wasn't working. The Republicans weren't agreeing with us. No, they were just sitting there waiting for Democrats to cave, and regrettably, it looks like they were right. We'll have to see what happens, because this continuing resolution just gets us to January. All issues at that point will be revisited, including health care. And we have to remember that during the first Trump administration, there was a shutdown, we reopened, and then there was another shutdown. So we may end up right back where we started from, but we will have an opportunity.
Once again, this is the Tele-Town Hall with Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia. He's giving opening remarks, and then he's going to take about 50 minutes of questions.
This deal will pass. It looks like it's going to pass the Senate, and they can do it on a party line vote in the House. They haven't gotten all their votes lined up, so we're not sure. We'll just have to see. In the meanwhile, we have a lot to discuss tonight, and I'm pleased to be joined by Ellen Teller from the Food Research and Action Center, commonly called FRAC. Ellen will briefly discuss some of the ongoing issues with SNAP and food assistance for families, and I know that's a top concern for many of us. Ellen, I yield to you for some comments.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join on this evening's call. Just real briefly, it has been 6 weeks of utter chaos and confusion based on conflicting memos and guidance coming out of this administration's USDA. There have been lawsuits, just as the congressman mentioned, district courts, courts of appeal, even the Supreme Court intervening, trying to get USDA and this administration to release the dollars in contingency funds that were set aside for emergencies and disruptions in distribution of benefits to get assistance to families in need. And this has just been a nightmare for the 42 million people who rely on SNAP, but you can only imagine what it has been like for states that are trying to process and administer this program. One day they're told you could do partial payments based on, a certain calculation. The next day there's a tweet from the president saying, I'm not going to release any funds until after the shutdown is over. The next day they get another calculation from USDA. Then they get the next day told that they can issue full benefits, and then the courts get involved, and there's been a constant back and forth. The reason I'm raising the incredible strain this has on states is that big ugly law that the congressman referred to that passed in July of this year also made significant changes to SNAP. It created time limits for veterans, unhoused people, youth coming out of foster care, but also for the first time imposed SNAP time limits on parents of children 14 years and older, that they are required to work 20 hours a week. And I've listened to members of Congress on CNN, on the TV saying, we never make parents work because staying home and taking care of your children is the responsibility of a parent. But that is not the case in the law that was passed in July. For the first time, parents of children 14 and older are going to be required to work those 20 hours or they will lose their SNAP benefits. So the other thing I just wanted to mention is in the big ugly law that passed in July, there was a provision, and without getting too technical, it shifted a lot of additional responsibilities onto states. It requires states to pay a much larger share of any administrative costs associated with SNAP while cutting its workforce. Then it also, for the first time ever in fiscal year 2028, states are going to be required to pay a portion of their benefits. And we now realize during the past 6 weeks how difficult it has been for states to have to step in on the federal government's role in providing SNAP benefits. Food banks, religious organizations, municipalities have all tried to fill the void, but the responsibility on the feds is so large that it's impossible for all these state and local and philanthropic organizations to fill that void. So moving forward, we have to take the lessons that we've learned from the past 6 weeks and try to work with members of Congress like Mr. Scott to try to undo the harm in H.R. 1. And the other thing that the congressman is very, very knowledgeable about, because he sits as the ranking member on education in the workforce, is if you are a child in a SNAP household, you are automatically eligible for free school meals. If your family gets cut off of SNAP, or if you live in a state that says we can't pay that cost share in fiscal year 28, all those children will lose their automatic eligibility for free school meals.
Well, thank you, Ellen. Is there anything else you needed to say?
No, I am here for the Q&A.
Sounds good. And with that, Austin, let's recognize some questions.
Yes, and if you have a question, if you're on the line and you would like to ask a question, please hit *3. Again, that's *3, and you will be added to the queue. First, we are going to go to Elisa from Newport News. Elisa, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. I appreciate everything that you do for us in Newport News. I applaud you. My hat's off to you. First question is, I am very disappointed in Tim McCain, and I want to know why he didn't hold the line and why did he cave with the Republicans. That's the first question. And my second question is, because I did vote for him, my second question is, what are the women and young girls are going to do about the WIC program feeding their babies, since the president don't mind spending millions of dollars on with taxpayer money going golfing, going to the Washington Redskins game, and there's people that's going hungry. I just want to know.
Well, I disagreed with Senator Kane's vote, but I would say that he was able to get more into the deal. At least he got something out of it. Work provisions for the federal workers. The others, I think, were all lined up to vote for it, whether it had those good provisions or not. But I think, on balance, I disagreed with his vote. In terms of WIC, that was in jeopardy several weeks ago, but the administration found ways to, I think, fund the WIC program. That's a very important program, and it's been found to have significant positive impact on a child's growth, both during pregnancy and early years of life. And so that's an extremely valuable program. And if you miss that, if the child is malnourished anytime during that time, that has lifelong impacts. And you mentioned golfing and ballrooms. One of the problems during the whole shutdown is that the president hasn't been focused. He's been more focused on, he spent more time, in the Democratic leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, has said that the president has spent more time on the golf course during the shutdown than talking to Democratic leaders. He spent more time talking about his gold-plated ballroom and apparently more focus on the problems in Argentina than he has on getting the government reopened. And that is, those have been problems getting the president focused, because many of the members of Congress don't know what to do until the president tells them exactly what to do. So his lack of focus has been a problem. He's been on 2 foreign trips since the shutdown began, and so that has been he hadn't even been in the country. So that's been another problem. But the WIC program is extremely important, and we're doing everything we can to make sure it's funded. It was in jeopardy early on, and I think I've introduced legislation with a few others to try to make sure that the WIC program is never in jeopardy, that it's an automatic pilot and continues whether there's a shutdown or not. We usually fund it well in advance, so if there is a little temporary shutdown, there's enough money there to continue the program. But with the record shutdown, it was in jeopardy, but the administration figured out how to pay the WIC program, unlike what they did with the SNAP program.
Right out the gate, first
Thank
question
you.
on
Next,
Tim Kaine
we are
and the capitulation.
Anyone has a question they would like to ask, please hit *3. Again, that's *3 if you would like to ask a question. We are going to move to Roscoe from Norfolk. Roscoe, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can.
Okay, my question was related to the fact that I in somewhat agree with Tim voting, because I think it should give a chance to swear in the young lady, the maybe we can find out what about the Epstein file that they're doing so hard, any chance of that. And at the same fact, how do we as citizens end up paying for senators and representatives and presidents spending so much money, and yet still they want to starve out the general public, meaning don't want to sponsor things that benefit the general public, who are the ones that make it possible that they are able to have all of this money, like the spending and the $1 billion given away and all of that. And that's sort of the two questions with a comment. Can you give me a little bit more clarity on that? The one is...
Well, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. The one the one I'm referencing, the young lady that was elected that they haven't sworn into the House yet. I think that would be able to take place at this time. Hopefully, if they reopen the House.
Right. Representative Grijalva was elected to succeed her father. Was elected about 30 days ago. Should have been sworn in a long time ago. Although we've been on vacation, we have what they call pro forma sessions, where just to comply with the constitutional requirement that you meet every few days or go on a formal recess, we meet every couple of days. And what they do is they open the session, say a prayer, say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then adjourn. They have sworn people in during those pro forma sessions. So there's no reason why she hadn't been sworn in a long time ago. The fact is, she would be a signatory on you mentioned the Epstein files. There's what's called a discharge petition. There's legislation pending to open up the Epstein files. She would be the 218th vote, which would mean that they have to take action and actually take a vote on the floor on whether or not to open up some more of the Epstein files. And the speaker, I think, has been reluctant to swear her in, because as soon as she swears in, she's going to sign the petition, be the 218th vote. So he will, if we go into session, I think all of his excuses will run out, and she will be sworn in. I think your other question dealt with how. Could you say your other question again? Still there?
Yeah, I'm here. The other question, can you hear me now?
I got you.
Yeah, my reference was in relationship to, I guess there need to be something that could help the general public when we have these shutdowns, and as what's going on now, that we are paying, in a sense, people, the president and the representatives overall generally, to take money away and starve the regular people who are making all of this possible by the jobs and the work and the effort they have to do. They're not properly representing their constituents.
Well, the voters are going to have something to do with that. When you elect people that don't appear to care about the people they're representing, that's why you have elections. You kind of inferred that members of Congress were getting paid. I think most, technically, we could be paid, but I think most have asked the payroll clerk to withhold our paychecks, and get paid when we open up. That's what happens when government employees, when we finally open up, government employees will get paid for all the time they missed, whether they were actually working or furloughed. Even furloughed workers will get checks to make up for the for the time they lost. And I think most of the members of Congress are in that same situation. But how people represent, you have to look and watch, and then deal with that at election time. Thank you for your question.
A reminder that the voters put these people in the office to the tune of 70 million people.
Congressman Scott.
Hi, Congressman, and I'm sorry I hadn't followed the Democratic Party much. I'm sorry about that. I elected President Trump, and I'm very confused on some of the things that he's doing. When he was ordered by the courts to pay out the SNAP benefits for the remaining of this month here in November, how does he have the opportunity or authority to refuse to do that? That I'm confused on.
Well, I think he's appealed to the Supreme Court. They have issued an injunction to order him, and I think the Supreme Court lifted the the injunction requiring him to make the payment. So he has a couple of days, but only a few days to get it done. And I think opening the government, I think we're going to beat him to the punch and open the government where all of this will be mute.
Right.
There's really no excuse. He's been ordered by district courts, by appellate courts, and keeps appealing
And what is
just
his
to
reason?
delay, just to delay. Say again.
What is his reason for not? Why did
Well,
he file an appeal?
well, first of all, why if he could pay the benefits
Well,
to people that are hungry, why doesn't he do it?
Right.
That's the first thing. Not why he doesn't do it when the court makes him do it. But Ellen, do you want to add anything to this?
Yes, very much so. So SNAP has an appropriated line item fund of $6 billion for what's called a contingency fund that is available just for these kinds of emergencies.
Okay.
He said although that fund has been used before in disruptions, his USDA said that's only for natural disaster. And the court said, no, that was intended just for this type of emergency. You have to release that fund. Then Congressman Scott mentioned the WIC program earlier. They used other funds within USDA to move funding around to be able to pay for programs like WIC. What the court said to the administration is, you have the authority to move monies around. So you can take the $6 billion in the contingency fund and find $2 billion from these other funds, and there was money that they were sitting on that they could have moved in order to allow for full SNAP payments for the month of December nationwide. The district court and the Court of Appeals both said, you have the money, you have the authority, do it. And in each case, USDA and the Department of Justice appealed. So that was the frustrating part of it, that the courts told them, you have the authority, you have the money, we can end this tomorrow.
Right. And that should be his first priority, to feed the American people. Yes.
I think so.
I agree. My other question, I got to think of what I was going to ask you, because I actually have like 3 more questions I want to ask. So I'm going to have to get your phone number and call your office.
Okay, 757-380-1000.
What was the last 4?
757-380-1000.
Okay, 1000. So my other question that I'm going to ask for tonight, what was
Cheryl, we just gotta ask one more question for you, and then we have other people in the queue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I knew I had 2 questions. What was his thought process when he started laying off all these federal workers? That cannot be beneficial to the economy, because I know they got a furlough package, but doesn't that eventually leave them using the system in order to help until they find jobs. So I don't see how he felt that would be a benefit to the American people.
Well, I don't know what his thought process was. He has the responsibility to faithfully execute the laws. The federal workforce, federal civil service is not a jobs program. It's a service program. The workers provide services to the American people, and they're there providing those services. And and Doge went through and just fired people randomly without any regards to the jobs they were doing, the services they were providing, or any regard to the effect it would have on the workforce morale, recruiting. How do you recruit people when you're firing people randomly? Who wants to work for an agency like that? You'll have to ask them why they did it. It made no sense, it affected the economy, but more importantly, it affected the ability of the federal government to do its job.
That was an odd series of questions that
Thank you for your question.
called on the congressman to be a mind reader, but that was interesting, the concerns from the caller on Snap.
News, Carl, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Hello, Bobby.
Hey, how you doing?
Scott, doing okay. So I have one question for you. As far as I know, we recently had an election in Virginia. We changed governors. Do you expect that to impact how President Trump treats Virginia? As far as I know, he's done different things in different states, as far as bringing in military or other personnel or threatening projects. Like, do you expect him to do the same thing to Virginia now? And
well, I would certainly hope not. Virginia has had a tradition going back about 40 years. Only once have we elected a governor who is the same party as the sitting president. Only once in about more than 40 years. And so this having a Democratic governor elected while you have a Republican president is not unusual. And when you said, will they be treated differently? They should not be treated differently. When we appropriate money on the federal budget, you're supposed to spend the money as it's appropriated. And we don't, when you have a SNAP program or when you have an infrastructure program for transportation projects, it doesn't say, and priority shall be given to states with a Democratic or Republican governor. But President Trump has publicly said that he is not. A few weeks ago, he said he's got all these projects. He's not sending money to blue states. I mean, it's an outrage. So I don't know. He certainly should not, but you'll have to ask him what he intends to do, and that's why the assurance in the appropriations bill that is not there, that would require him to spend the money as it's been appropriated, not when he wants, where he wants, if he wants, to blue states or red states. He ought not have that choice. And the failure to put in language in the continuing resolution just allows him to kind of treat the federal budget as a personal piggy bank. That's not the way presidents should behave, and hopefully he won't do that. But we'll have to see.
Not a bad question there from the caller from Newport News. Good question.
Please hit *3. Again,
this president has been very punitive toward Democrats, Democrat-led cities, particularly black mayors and Democratic governors.
So what is going to happen with special education as it relates to the dismantling of the Department of Education? And specifically, both teachers and those who benefited from receiving services under the IDEA.
Well, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is enforced by the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. In the 1970s, lawsuits were brought that alleging that school systems were not educating students with disability, and that was illegal discrimination. The courts made it clear that no, you have to educate everyone. You can't discriminate against those with disabilities. And legislation passed, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which required states to provide a free and appropriate public education to those students with disabilities. It promised to pay 40% of the expenses. We've never come up with all that money, but the states have that obligation whether the money is there or not. But it's enforced by the Department of Education. If the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, frankly, has been decimated, people have been fired, staff is only a fraction of what it used to be. You don't have the staff there to enforce the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and without the federal enforcement, you would expect states to regress to do what they were doing before the law passed, and students with disabilities won't get the education that they deserve. So that's one of the problems with disbanding the Department of Education. It's there to provide civil rights, really not much education. Education is local and state. But the civil rights aspects, the equal access for students with disabilities, those with English as a second language in low-income areas, Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, money into low-income areas because we fund education with the real estate tax. Obviously, low-income areas are at a significant disadvantage in providing educational opportunities. And so Title I puts money into low-income areas to try to make up for that. That's what the department is there for. In higher education, they don't tell colleges what to teach. They just make sure that there are Pell Grants and student loans so students can go. So the impact on students with disabilities can be profound. There are already instances, and we're hearing people say that they brought a case against a school system for failure to provide the free and appropriate education, and all of a sudden they call their representative, their lawyer on the office, and they're not there anymore, and they don't know what happened to the case. We're hearing that, so it's going to have a profound effect, and that's one of the reasons the putting a halt on the RIFs, the reduction in force, all these firings, putting an end to that would be very helpful, particularly to situations like the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education.
Next, we are going to move to Rick from Hampton. Rick, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Good evening, Congressman Scott. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good, good. The question I have is with money and stuff, coming to healthcare and stuff, are legal immigrants, or illegal aliens, immigrants, whatever people want to call them. I don't have nothing against medical care for anybody that needs it, but are they getting benefits like rent, paid, food, and everything? Why Americans struggle?
They don't get that's one of the speaking points the Republicans use on the Affordable Care Act tax credits. They say illegal immigrants, people here that are undocumented, shouldn't get benefits. Fact is, they don't. They are not legally getting access to Affordable Care Act tax credits. So when they say that illegal immigrants are getting benefits under the Affordable Care Act, they're not telling the truth. But you know, they don't have much more to talk about, so they might as well make something up.
Great example there of misinformation and how it pervades our society. Fox lies about that all the time.
And when they say it on a talk show, the host will say, "You know, that's not right." So that's just what they do.
Yeah, lying works is what
Congressman,
we just
that's
learned there.
also,
Lying
if
works.
you are undocumented, you cannot participate in the SNAP program. And in HR 1, protected classes of people, refugees and asylees who came to this country were terminated from the SNAP program.
Next, we are going to move to Tony from Hampton. Tony, you are on with Congressman Scott.
How's it going, Congressman, in the audience?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Oh, I'm making it. I have questions for sure, but I'm going to keep it brief. It seems to me that the Democratic Party, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, every Democrat that I can get to vote for, I will. But what I'm seeing in these days is nobody on our side is really standing up for all the nonsense that Trump is allowed to go out and do. I mean, I know that we don't have the numbers in the Senate and the Congress to actually beat him back or control him, but we can still stand up every single time he goes out and tries to defund education and defund all these government jobs. It's just a wrecking ball, and I don't see why our folks are letting them get away with that. That's my question.
In the House, we're standing up, voting every kind of vote we can to just say no with all they're doing, and we've been pretty united as a boisterous no when they try to do all the stuff they're doing. When they, the Senate was doing well until this week. I don't know what happened all of a sudden. But they were frankly getting a lot of pressure from people who, when you close down the government, there's a lot of pain involved. This president is up here cutting nutrition benefits, cutting the airports are dysfunctional. You can't, you call it government agency, you can't get an answer. The people working, not getting paid. There's a lot of problems that occur when you shut down the government. But if we're going to have health care, and they're willing to let the government shut down rather than even discuss health care, I'm not sure there's what else we can do.
Next, we are going to move to Pamela. Pamela, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Good evening, Congressman Scott. Basically, my question, my first question is about the SNAP benefits. As I was listening to the beginning, what I heard was that this bill is temporary. Basically, it goes through until January. But you said that the SNAP benefits would be off the table. And I wanted to know if what you meant by that was that the SNAP benefits are now going to be protected beyond January, or does that mean?
Yes. Part of the bill funds the Department of Agriculture for the year, okay, which funds SNAP for the full year. Ellen, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, in addition to SNAP, the WIC program and all the child nutrition programs, school breakfast, lunch, summer feeding, are all protected through September 30th of 2026, which is the end of the fiscal year. So those programs will be they'll be attached to the continuing resolution as the annual appropriations bill. So they will be absolutely protected moving forward.
Thank you so much. I only had one other question, and this is related to basically my overall disappointment, because I've always had Republican stance as far as my personal views, but they do not mesh with what's going on, and I'm disappointed and appalled by what my president and what the people who support him have done in his administration. And I don't know now what can I or other people, I'm not the only one who's disappointed that I voted for him. What can we do besides the voting? What can we do to voice our contempt for what is happening right now? What can we do to make a difference?
Well, voting is one, but participating in organizations that are active, a lot of them are filing lawsuits, being involved in those, and other civic organizations where your voice can be amplified. But FRAC is one of those organizations. Ellen, you want to talk about FRAC?
So yeah, we are convening both at the national level with all different national organizations, whether it's Feeding America or the Center on Budget, but we also work with health groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics, just a whole host of education groups, because as I mentioned earlier, SNAP and the food and nutrition programs are often tied to SNAP and also tied to Medicaid. If you are on Medicaid, you are automatically eligible for the WIC program. So there's a lot of alignment that goes on amongst the different programs, and we work with a whole host of organizations in making sure that these programs are protected, but also moving forward that we make sure these programs stretch and cover all of those folks that are entitled to them. I'm really disappointed that less than half of people who are eligible for the WIC program participate in it. It is a tragedy in this country that infant mortality rates are increasing when we have this amazing nutrition and healthcare support program that helps people, as soon as they get pregnant and carry them literally through the pregnancy, making sure that they not only get good nutrition, but get all the counseling services that people need to get them through a pregnancy. So there's a lot of work that goes into these coalitions that support the programs. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, there's a lot of harm that was inflicted in HR 1, in the big ugly bill. And we are going to be working with these national and state and local organizations to make sure that elected officials understand the impact of those provisions on counties, municipalities, on the economies of local communities. Oftentimes, supermarkets are the economic engine of a community, and ensuring that people on SNAP have access to that supermarket, critically important.
Jesus. So 41 million people are on SNAP.
Left, so we're going to try to get to as many.
And they have 8 minutes left, and this is due to end at 7 p.m. Thanks to Portsmouth Coffee Talk and Slim for the $10. Really appreciate it. This has about 10 minutes to go.
All the government sites blame the Democrats for the shutdown.
There were several instances where if you emailed many government officials, you'd have a bounce back email response that essentially blamed the Democrats for the shutdown. That had a number of problems to it, not the least of which is you have the person essentially because it's their own personal email, making a political statement they didn't even want to make. The Hatch Act traditionally has been one where, and you had this during all administrations. I remember during Obama, they'd accuse somebody of a Hatch Act violation, and everybody would get all upset and fix it. The allegation, and if the White House counsel indicated, yes, that's a violation of the act, that would be the end of it. With this administration, you had White House officials saying, if it's a violation, then put me in prison. knowing that there is no criminal penalty to hatch acts. The penalty is that you could lose your job, but that requires your supervisor to take action. Well, if your supervisor doesn't care, or if your supervisor did it, obviously you're pretty safe. We've never had violations of the Hatch Act like we've had under this administration go by without any accountability. It's been one of the disappointments, and there are many right now looking at the Hatch Act to determine whether or not it needs to be strengthened, whether or not there need to be specific penalties, and without that, people have found that they could violate the Hatch Act, and if the administration doesn't care, nothing happens. That has not been the case before. It's always been the case when the White House counsel says this is a problem. The activity stops right then and there. I mean, people are very sensitive about it. This administration hasn't shown that sensitivity, and have just flaunted the Hatch Act and a lot of other ethical violations are going on without any accountability.
Next, we're going to move to Joyce from Newport News. Joyce, you are on with Congressman Scott.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening. I'm sorry. This concerning the SNAP program. My question is, for those people that have children 14 and older, and with the unemployment rate, how would this program not hurt them? Because usually, if you start with, I'm sorry.
We made a change in the SNAP benefits that really were appalling, that involved children over 14. Ellen, you want to go into the details?
Yes, and I am horrified to say that the bill that came out of the House of Representatives took it down to age 7 and older. I know the congressman fought hard against that provision. There is no funding for childcare in this bill. There's no recognition of the transportation costs that people would have to incur to find 20 hours of paid work a week or finding volunteer opportunities at 20 hours a week. If they do not credit taking care of a dependent adult child or parent as part of your work. So it is cruel the way it has been drafted. And this is one of the provisions that we are working very hard to change. And just listening to some of the members talk about it, they're shocked when you tell them it was in the bill. And so we have a big education effort ahead of us to really walk members through what exactly they voted for in H.R. 1 and trying to undo the harm. But rest assured, there is a very large contingent of anti-poverty and anti-hunger groups that are working with members like Mr. Scott to undo the harm.
And part of the problem is, even if you are complying, your complying is not self-executing. You have to fill in the paperwork to show that you have actually done the work or done the volunteer work. If you don't fill out the paperwork, you lose your benefits. It's the same problem with the Medicaid work requirement. Most of the people that lose their Medicaid under the work requirement will lose their Medicaid not because they're not working, but because they didn't fill out the paperwork, or not because they're disabled and therefore exempt. They didn't fill out the paperwork. The doctor was on vacation when the paperwork was due. I mean, I don't know what. And then somebody's got to review the paperwork. If they're on vacation, the paperwork didn't get reviewed, you may lose your benefits. This extra paperwork is a problem in addition to the work requirement or the whatever volunteer requirement. In addition to those, the paperwork requirement is going to cost a lot of people their benefits.
Thank you. We have another online question, this time from Brian. Brian wants to know, quote, how is Trump funding his ballroom or sending money to Argentina, question mark?
Well, I don't know how he's sending money to Argentina. I would point out that at one point they were talking about $40 billion, and we reviewed that was more sending money to Argentina to solve their problems. $40 billion was more than his budget for K through 12 education for a year.
Wow.
It's just the priorities are just really appalling. And his ballroom, it was $200 billion, now it's $300 billion, and apparently he's getting donations. There is some question about the legality of accepting donations under those circumstances, but you have to wonder if somebody is contributing millions of dollars. If you're collecting $300 million in donations, no telling how big these donations may be. What are the donors expecting in return? That's a problem. And so, but as I said earlier, he's spending more time focused on the problems of Argentina and his gold-plated ballroom than he is in getting the government reopened and feeding children and educating the next generation.
I think we have time for one more question. We're going to go to Claude from Newport News. Claude, you are on with Congressman Scott.
It's question 12.
Oh, hey, Congressman, how are you tonight?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm a bit confused about stuff. You know, I'm a citizen of the United States, and we all are supposed to be equal. And if I were to, do some kind of wrong, and a court said to me, Claude, you have to do this or you have to do that. If I didn't do that, then I'd be hauled off to jail. I'd be held accountable for the things that I have not done that the court has ordered me to do. And I guess my question is, how is it possible that a citizen of the United States, i.e. our president, is able to ignore what the courts that our system is all based on? How can he do that and get away with it?
Well, I've been disappointed that the courts aren't really putting the direct question before us, that direct question, because they will suggest that, well, maybe he didn't ignore the order, or maybe he didn't understand it, or maybe we'll continue the case. And it's hard to find a situation where a court has found that somebody knew that they had been ordered to do something but intentionally did not do it and had a finding that you are now in contempt of court. They haven't had that finding. And there's a lot of situations where it just seems to me that the courts have gotten close. When the planes went to El Salvador after they'd been ordered to not to take off, it seemed to me the court was a little casual in holding them accountable. And in many other situations where they just haven't come down and say that the order was given and the order was not respected. Now, I'd point out that the order is not just to the president, it's to anybody who's involved. If the pilot knew the court order said don't take off, and somebody in Homeland Security said take off, the pilot would be in a difficult situation because he would know that he's violating the court order, and the court could find him in contempt. And the person that ordered him to take off, find them in contempt. You don't have to do just the President of the United States. And the failure of the courts generally I don't know whether they got together and said, well, let's try to avoid the question. But I've been disappointed that they haven't kind of laid down the law. This is a court order. You disobeyed it. Bring your toothbrush because you're going to jail tomorrow morning. Or get this straight quickly or you're going to jail. And they haven't done that. And I've been a little disappointed in the judicial branch in not exercising their power. And I think they've been a little casual. They haven't found somebody in contempt and then failed to do something about it. But there have been too many examples of situations where the administration has gone into court. Some judges have said they didn't believe the testimony that the administration was presenting, which ought to be a little problematic. But they haven't found someone in contempt. They haven't found somebody directly violated a direct order of the court. And until they get to that point, you don't have the crisis that you have suggested. But I think they should have drawn the line a long time ago.
Thank you, Claude, and thank you, Congressman, and thank you to Ellen as well for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We had a lot of great questions tonight, and there will be more town halls and telephone town halls in the future. But if you have other comments or concerns, please send a message or sign up for Congressman Scott's e-newsletter by visiting our website at bobbyscott.house.gov. That's BOBBYSCOTT.house.gov. You can also call our district office at 757-380-1000. And Congressman Scott, did you have any other closing comments?
No, I want to thank Ellen again, Ellen Teller from Food Research and Action Center, or FRAC, for joining us. She gave very valuable information, and we're delighted to have her on the phone. And we want to thank all the participants for participating. We thank you for the questions, and thank you for your interest. And we'll have other town halls in the future. Hopefully we'll have an in-person town hall soon, but we usually only get a few hundred come into in-person town halls, and we get a few thousand on the telephone town hall. So we'd like to go back and forth. There's something a little special about an in-person town hall that you can't replicate on the phone. So thank you for participating. And with that, this will end the call.
Okay, so that was Congressman Bobby Scott of Newport News, Virginia, and he actually took 13 questions, and you could see in that a lot of that had to do with SNAP. The first question off the bat was a criticism of Senator Tim Kaine for being one of 8 senators to go along with a deal that the Republicans have put together in the Senate to end the shutdown without fixing the issue of the cuts to health care or the tax credits that will expire on December 31, which of course will raise healthcare prices for millions of people across the country. It would seem that the Trump administration is quite focused on making life more expensive and more difficult for Americans while sending $40 billion of tax money over to Argentina and hundreds of millions over to the Middle East. So it's a very interesting pattern of behavior. The situation, state of play in Congress right now is simply that at about Tuesday, tomorrow, or Wednesday, should be coming back into session probably Wednesday or Thursday to deal with whatever the Senate sends them. We don't really know the details of when that will be because one of the senators, Rand Paul, is holding up the other votes that are linked to this deal that was made that started last night. The first procedural vote started last night, but there are other votes that are supposed to happen. They have not happened yet because Rand Paul has some sort of an issue, and no one knows what the timing is going to be because of that. But it does, if I had to predict, I would say probably Wednesday or Thursday, you'll see the U.S. House come back in the session, and you will see a lengthy conversation about what will happen next. It is predicted that there will be a new Democratic member of the House, Rep-elect Grijalva, who should have been sworn in weeks ago. That will set a chain of events into motion that will likely release the Epstein files, unless somehow or another, the Republicans in the House play a game of trying to block them again. I don't know how they're going to do that because the votes are there to release the files once she is sworn in. At any rate, so that was interesting, that town hall, because of course there are a lot of questions about SNAP and a lot of questions about just the general issue of food insecurity. Of course, as somebody who's been to several in-person town halls that Congressman Scott has done in the last 3 months or so, he always gets his two questions that every Democrat is getting at every town hall. One is, what are we doing and what can we do to fight Trump? That comes up every single time. The other one that comes up is some sort of concern about democracy and, what the state of play is and why the country finds itself at this point. And that really always goes back to the question of voting and the question of voting and the question of 70 million people deciding to put Donald Trump into power. And, this is what happens. I mean, I'm not sure why anybody's surprised. The Vice President Harris laid out everything that was going to happen, and what she laid out during the campaign in 2024 last year is happening. So there's nothing, I'm not sure why people are surprised at this point about what they're seeing. It's all in Project 2025. It was predicted months before, and frankly, there's nothing, shouldn't have been anything surprising about what happened next. I mean, I'm not sure why that has been problematic, but I think it does in part go to misinfo and disinfo and people not being told what the truth is and games that Fox News plays, et cetera, and so on. So, but it is interesting. He got some questions that's related to that. At any rate, Congressman Scott does a lot of town halls. Jen Kiggins does none, and Jen Kiggins is one of the people to keep an eye on over the next few days. She says that she is in favor of this and in favor of that when it comes to health care, but when it comes to actually voting, she's always voting alongside Donald Trump. She is a targeted seat, which is the 2nd district in Virginia. And you can rest assured that there'll be a lot of Democrats who will be running for that seat. There's a lot of interest groups that have really been focused on Michael Fegan's running for Congress. He's a delegate in Virginia Beach who's won some very close races, and there's been several groups that have tried to get him to run. We'll see if that happens. And that is it for tonight. I probably will not go live at 9 o'clock because I just went live for an hour with this town hall, which started at 6 o'clock, but very likely to go live Tuesday at 9 o'clock to talk about the state of play in Congress with regard to the deal that 8 Democrats made with members of the Republican Senate to end the shutdown, which of course has not ended yet. It's on day 41. It has not ended yet. The federal government is still shut down. So what was set into motion by that agreement with the eight Democrats agreeing with the Republican members of the Senate is what will probably lead eventually to the government reopening. But the problem has been, and the problem that people have, is that there was no deal made for healthcare at all, and really no deal made for anything. But we do have to keep in mind that all of this was put into motion by Donald Trump. The Democrats' inability to fight is really related to the fact that people need to wake up when it comes to voting and when it comes to paying attention to what people are saying, particularly on the Republican side, when they say that they're going to do something when they get power. This is, again, nothing happening now that was a huge surprise. So at any rate, that's pretty much it. Thanks for those who joined and hit the like button. Really appreciate it. Appreciate Portsmouth Coffee Talk and Slim and the $10 that came in during this live. Really appreciate it. This is Lauren Burke, and I'll be back likely tomorrow to talk about some of the things that I encountered today and talking to Hakeem Jeffries and some other members of Congress and their staff about what's going on right now in this country and in this particular situation with regard to the pending rise in the healthcare rates in 2026 and the massive cuts to the SNAP program, otherwise known as food stamps, food for the poor, coming up. All these things happening right before Thanksgiving, right before a lot of turkey giveaways and a lot of food giveaways. At any rate, this is Lauren Burke. I'll be back soon.